One of the most experienced players in the world of chess, Levon Aronian, takes on the young world champion Domaraju Gukesh in the penultimate round of the Superbet Chess Classic. We've already had a few moves that have been played on the board, 8 moves to be precise. Let's just have a look at how we have managed to reach this position on the board. The game started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, and Gukesh here played a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, bishop e7, the closed Ruy Lopez, and one would have imagined Levon to go rook e1 or d3, but he decided to take on c6, a delayed exchange on that square, pawn takes, and now rook e1. This is quite uncommon. D3 is much more common there. Queen d6 by Gukesh, and after d4, the idea is if you take e5, simply wins a piece. So that's the reason why he played his bishop to g4, knight d2, and we reach the position in the game. It's Gukesh's move now, and he's thinking Levon so well prepared, he gets up from the board. Gukesh chops off the pawn on d4 with his queen. Wow. The thing is, if you take with the knight, I'm going to pick up your queen here. But you have to take it. You've given up the pawn. So knight takes d4. Bishop takes d1. And it's very interesting that there is a game that has reached this position. Knight takes c6. Very interesting. If you take here, he'll take back on d1. So bishop takes c2 is the main move here. And the game that they are following is between Dmitry Kolarz and Vincent Keimer. Vincent was Gukesh's second, so maybe Levon has come prepared with that line. King e7, but already the position that has been reached is kind of equal. b3 makes a lot of sense because you want to give a check and hassle the king on e7. Bishop comes out to d3 so that it doesn't get trapped here. Later it could come to b5. Goes for a check. And now king to e6 played by Gukesh. The normal way to continue here is rook a d1, maybe even knight f3, but he goes rook a c1, which is logical. You're putting pressure on the c7 pawn, and if c6 is played, it's weakening the dark squares a bit. So Gukesh rightly brings his rook to c8. If everything goes well, black's position is excellent with the king on e6. But clearly, there could be some chances of an attack. And Levon goes all out. He plays f4, which is not particularly the best move in this position. But he's risking it. He's seeing that Gukesh hasn't had the best of events. He has had 5 draws, 2 losses. And he takes the pawn here. And now what does Levon want? Does he want to push his pawn forward? Does he want to bring his knight to f3? He goes e5. Wow. And will Gukesh go knight d5 or will Gukesh go knight g4? That's the question. Both moves look pretty good, but e5 looks so scary. Because if now knight f3 followed by check or check here could be dangerous. Goes knight g4. He wants to put the knight in the heart of white's camp. And Levon now brings his knight to f3. But he has also burnt a lot of time. 43 minutes for Levon. I think the big threat is, of course, knight g5 check. Knight d4 is also a threat, but of course you can't stop both. So you have to decide whether this is a bigger threat or this one. Gukesh does feel that knight g5 was a bigger threat, so he plays h6. And in order to justify his pawn investment in the position, Levon has to give the check. Because imagine you are pawn down, but also the knight is coming here. It's a bit too much. So knight d4. King comes up to d5. And now pawn comes up to e6. Well, the plan now is that if f e6, then I have knight e6 and the king is stranded. So very good move found here by Gukesh, which is knight e3. Notice how he did not get tempted to take this because of bishop b2 check and rook c d1 pinning here. So he goes knight e3, e takes f7 played, and now this is queening. But I guess for Gukesh, taking this knight is the right decision here, because you will get two pieces for a rook. Imagine king takes d4, queen, that's what he does. Queen here, take, and it's already a better position for black. So Levon goes check. He changes his track. He doesn't play queen here. He gives a check. Maybe he wants to chop off the pawn on g7. King d5. Excellent move found by Gukesh. Again, not getting tempted into king e4 because it's slightly inaccurate after bishop takes g7. So king d5, bishop takes g7, and now the best move is c5 because the threat is to play f8 or take on h8, and then the rook has to move away and c7 would hang. So not c6 but c5. That is an important move. So c5 also prepares. For example, if I go c6, there is rook d1, take, and now this is in trouble. My king coming here would later eventually be met with rook e1, rook e8. So that's the reason why c5 and Gukesh finds it. It's a brilliant move. It's an excellent one. And here the main point, of course, is rook e d1 is now met with king e4. Very, very classy move. Gukesh finds it. Excellent chess. Because after bishop h8 now, rook h8, rook c5 is impossible. There are these big problems earlier on e5 that were there. Now it's no longer an issue here. So king e4, rook d2, and now rook f8. This move c5 is, I think, the best and the toughest move in the entire game that Gukesh found. It also stopped the white rook from jumping into c5. And now bishop f8, rook f8. Yes, he's going to lose the c5 pawn, but the bishop is gone, and that's very important. Rook takes c5. Rook takes f7. And black now has two pieces for a rook, but also look at those pieces. They are on such good squares in the center. a4 played. And Gukesh, who is now down to 7 minutes, finds bishop f1. Love this move, and actually one of the most practical ways of converting this position. He goes rook to c8. And the reason why this move bishop f1 is so good is because Gukesh is not sticking to his advantage in the position of two pieces for a rook. He's in fact giving it up, giving back those two pieces for a rook and a pawn. Check here. Of course, you don't want to go to e3, f3 because of check here. It gets a bit complicated. But king f5, fantastic move by Gukesh. And now you can take on g2 or you can take on e3. Yes, he takes on g2. Knight takes g2. King takes g2. and rook to c7 played. The threat is check, and then the rook could come up and take the b3 pawn. Gives a check. King e4. Rook f6. Sometimes rook endings are drawn, but this is not one of them. Mainly because the black king is so active, the f pawn is a passer, the b3 pawn is weak. And now this move that Gukesh has, which is rook c6, fantastic move, defending this pawn and planning to place the rook on b6 to attack b3. He plays rook f7. Of course, Levon knows that this game is almost over. There's no chance for him. He goes rook b6, attacking b3. And now a check. He goes king f5. The king will come to g4 and h4, where it will be well placed. Check again. King e4. Just repeating in order to gain some time and also reach move number 40. Smart play by Gukesh. Gives a check. King g5 played here. The white king cannot come up because rook takes b3 is just losing a pawn. So h4 check played. And now king takes h4 also wins, but king g4 is very clinical because check and then you take and you don't even lose the f4 pawn. Plays king g4 and we've hit move number 40 now. Gukesh gets up from his chair. He generally goes and has his snack after move 40. Rook g7 check played by Aronian. And he's shaking his head there. He's missed his chances in this game. In fact, I would not even put it as missing his chances. He tried a very, very risky and dubious opening. And Gukesh just came with all the accurate moves that can be made in the game. King takes h4. Now king f3. Gukesh takes on b3 with a check. King takes f4. And yes, you can give a check and pick up the a4 pawn, but then you lose the b7 pawn. So Gukesh instead just keeps this under control and wants to get his king down the board and start pushing his h pawn. a5 played. And king h3. And this is just completely winning. The h pawn is rushing down the board. Levon Aronian now has no real ideas or tricks left and he resigns the game. And with this, Gukesh manages to score a very, very important win in this event. And this is his first win. I love how Aronian resigned with a smile on his face. And in general, I think Levon's opening idea just didn't work. And look at Gukesh, by the way. He has this very nice, happy look on his face, which I think is something that comes after only a victory. It took him 7 rounds, but finally he's managed to score the win.